But the issue of waste more broadly too, how does a large agglomeration deal with recycling and with the removal of say, vegetable waste? All of which, actually, they may provide better energy, they may provide better fertilizer, fields or whatever. But I mean, precious metals, rare earths, huge number of our disposable, of our communications devices now contain finite elements effectively. How do we recycle those properly? How do you design a city to make recycling easier? It's not just a case of, you sort it out and put it in a different bin outside your apartment. Actually, how do you make it easier for people to do the right thing? Is part of design. It's the part of the way in which everybody needs to work together. Which kind of brings me on to, I know, something else you wanted to talk about. That this is collaborative work.
Oh, right.
In a number of different ways. So first, if you're producing standards, clearly you want to be able to help people around the world to see that a standard is worth maintaining, that it is worth having as a global thing. Different countries, different laws, different culture, different customs. So you've got to be talking to people. You've got to understand why what looks like a solution in one country isn't a solution in another country, because people have never behaved like that. It's culturally not acceptable, or they wouldn't even understand why you were starting from there. They'd start from somewhere else to solve the problem. So you have to enter partnerships with an open mind. You also have to deal with different law in different countries. That makes quite a big difference. The requirements will be different. It's very true around recycling, where there are quite clearly, even in Europe, from where I'm speaking, different countries have quite different approaches to the way in which they insist on citizens behaving in a particular way with recycling. That will vary across the world. None of us want to see landfill, which never feels right. But of course, if you're landfilling something that's effectively going to rot, then that's one thing. But if you're putting in a lot of plastic, that's another. So you've got to think your way through that. So this goes back to use of materials right from the word go. So I'm speaking very generally here, but what it says to me is that we have to be talking to each other. We have to be able to say, what are the goals that we are trying to achieve here? And we have to agree them. Hence the importance of the COP conferences. But increasingly, we must recognize that the population is still increasing. It places demands on resource in every possible respect. The migration of people away from the country and into cities has accelerated considerably. So a lot of the focus actually is, what do you do in conurbations to sustain? And the buildings are a key part. We all have to have somewhere to live, work, play, so forth. So that's kind of where there is a piece around how you talk to politicians as well.
Yeah.
And again, around the world, there are many different ways in which countries govern themselves, cities govern themselves. So you need to build the relationships there, not just with the politicians themselves, but with their advisors, with the civil servants and the people who actually do the day-to-day work. And again, you have to be talking, and most importantly, everybody has to be listening, because somewhere all the time there is someone with a solution. If you're not hearing, you may never find it. So there's a piece there about how we communicate, which takes us to this is scientifically based. We need evidence largely to be able to support having standards. If we had an artistic standard, we would be arguing for the rest of time, because we all have a different view of what we consider great art to be. But we should be able to coalesce around facts on, is this material carcinogenic, for example, if you're talking about healthy buildings. But we are in an odd place at the moment where a significant proportion of people seem to think that not all facts are actually facts, that I can have an opinion about whether something is true or not, when actually you can demonstrably prove that it's true. I think we need to kind of move forward in this. We need to be able to make a distinction between something on which you can have an opinion and something which is a starting point for a discussion because it is true. Now, it's got a simplistic way of putting it, because the truth of the matter is 200 years ago, you and I might have thought something was true, which we now think is nonsense, because science has gone further in explaining what the background was, and that the way of measuring what we thought was true 200 years ago was actually an improper method. Yes, that is always going to be the case, and that's part of progress. But so I think the overall message is, if we are not talking to each other, if we are not open about what we know and what we understand and can share it, we will not make good decisions. And there are a lot of different disciplines that will have to come together. So transportation people, your urban planners, surveyors, people who are doing the politics around urban planning, all critical parts. And then there's the question of money. In the end, speaks, somebody must fund what is going to happen. So you have to understand that if you produce a standard which is so gold-plated that nobody can possibly afford to ever build it, you're going too fast, and you need to work out, that's where we want to end up, but how do we get there? So it will be iterative. Is net zero 2030 achievable as opposed to 2050? Well, I think you have to have targets. Quite possibly you won't hit them, but you've got to be trying. And if you put a target off too far, there is no sense of urgency. So people will feel, we needn't worry about that. For the next 5 years, we'll spend the money on this over here. Meanwhile, for 5 years, we're going backwards on climate change and not forwards. So it's and that's political, but essentially.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned about people behavior and how to communicate with them several times. And I didn't thought that far about how building cities, well, especially sustainable cities and communities, is about communicating and listening to people. Yep. So could you share some, maybe you have actually faced some challenges, regarding how to communicate with people, and maybe successful initiatives or projects that the RICS has been involved in?
I suppose, speaking now not with my RICS hat on, we have been working on autonomous vehicle technology for 25 years.
Okay.
And that has been a really big challenge, because it took initially, I think we were all thinking, if you can start to build autonomous vehicle solutions in big cities, that this was essentially about making a journey easier for somebody, or quicker, particularly quicker. And it took too long to realize that actually a better transportation system in a city, what people, first of all, it isn't actually about the speed of journeys. That is absolutely the bottom of the list. For anybody involved in city planning, it's about land use. So the better connected a place in a city is on public transportation, the better, the more value it has, put simply that. So your business case for improving transportation is actually about how well land and buildings are used and how well they fit with actually how people behave. And if you build a transport, you run a bus route to the wrong place, you build a light railway to the wrong place, no one will use it, and consequently it will be very expensive for nothing. So that was one element of it. But the other interesting point that it took us too long to realize was the speed of the journey didn't matter. What did matter to the users was that it left when you said it was going to leave, and it arrived at that destination when they expected it to be, and that it was always the same. So when you and I make a journey, we expect our train to leave at 9 o'clock. We don't expect it to leave at 9:15, and we get frustrated it does. And we plan that it arrives at 10 o'clock at the destination. And then if it arrives at 10:30, we've lost 30 minutes. We're going to be late for the meeting, we're late for the, for the wedding we're going to, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter how fast we went. It doesn't matter if, it takes twice as long as it might have done, as long as you knew in advance how long it was going to take. Then you can plan your life properly. And it's that key element that underpins how sustainability needs to work in big cities. You have to understand how people behave. Will they use facilities, or will they, if they don't use them, would simply waste material, time, cost, money, all of it. So I think as a result, we now think about how we talk about transportation systems in a completely different way. And interestingly, that 25 years, of course, has seen the sustainability argument go right up. So now we're saying, if you're building a guideway for autonomous vehicles, for example, you're now much more interested in what materials you're using to build. Can you actually build one from wood in the right place, for example, rather than concrete or steel? And then suddenly, well, so fine, and how long is its lifespan, and so forth, enters into it. But you've got a different kind of debate going. And for me, that kind of, so we've been doing all that, and now that I'm doing this, I can see practically why all these different considerations have to be in place. So, but I mean, it is really quite important for everybody to understand that if the money doesn't work, nothing will work. It has to make sense to investors. And whether those people are investing private or public money doesn't matter. They have to see a good business and political case for what you want to do. And part of that, though, is about best use of resources. And that takes you back to standards always. Are we using the best materials for this? Has this got a decent length of life to it? Is it going to be, is it healthy? And that, I have to say, will probably one of the big debates around sustainability will be about healthy buildings going forwards. We know too much about the cost of population health, bad population health, all around the world. And a significant proportion of it is caused by bad environment. And that is often something to do with the way buildings are built and designed, as well as, questions of sanitation and so forth. So, yeah, all of that.
Right. Thank you very much for the, very insightful explanation. It is, well, personally, it also opened my eyes about the, all the people behavior, the standards in every sectors that we need to collaborate to make it everything better.
Well, I think what it goes to show, of course, is why things like Uniplat are so important, because you need forums, you need a platform where people can come together and where people can see diversity of thought, new research, new thinking, find people they can collaborate with. If you're a university in Jakarta and you want to collaborate with somebody at the University of Stockholm, you need to find them.
Yeah.
That's
Ex-
all of these kinds of forums for debate are essential, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, thankfully that we have technologies now called internet, and we can create platform like
Exactly.
that to provide place to people to collaborate.
Yes,
Oh,
but I think the point I'd make is that it's important that people trust the places they're collaborating.
right.
The message for some social media forums, they're not really places of trust, and
Okay.
that's why something like Uniplat is so important.